Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are here for another one of your questions about work, and we're in it still on some level. I mean, aftermath of a crisis. And for those of you who are here for the first time, I'm Roy. I'm a startup investor in the future of work, and I'm here with my teammate, Lori. So, Lori, what should we talk about today?
So last week was obviously the shutdown and for many founders crisis around Silicon Valley Bank. And we on Friday decided to go live and talk about what to do the day of a crisis. And so we thought it would make a ton of sense now that a few days have passed, there's more of a resolution clear to talk about what to do in the aftermath, because it doesn't just turn off like a light switch.
Yes. So, through the weekend too, I mean, it was 24/7. And the
Yes.
thing that I just say is that the feeling of being in a crisis can feel good. You feel use. I'll speak for myself. Can feel empowering, exciting, energetic. That I know that I'm doing something that may be valuable, and as a result, people who get good in crises sometimes end up drawing themselves to creating more crises where they don't exist. So I think the first step is to recognize that in the main, obviously there's always work, but the crisis has passed and you've entered a new phase that is the aftermath. And to me, that means a few things. One is it means sharing with others your perception. And you want to be careful about it because you never know, we thought it was over and then maybe First Republic was going to go under and then that didn't happen and, all that stuff. So you don't want to prematurely end it, but just acknowledge it's shifting to a different phase without trying to label the phase too much. Then
And
noticing
can
what,
I,
yeah,
really quick,
please.
when you say acknowledge, do you mean like something written, something verbal? What do you think
It
that?
depends on who, first of all, to yourself, most important, and then to whoever you're in it with. I mean, I told founders in our founder Slack that I kind of saw it as over. And I remember I told them, I was like, as soon as we had the credible news that the deposit guarantee, maybe not using the right language, the backstop was coming, I said, I took a nap. And then when the actual news came out, I was asleep and woke up to it, and
You
um,
actually wrote those words.
yeah, but I think I was trying to share what I was doing because I recognized that others might still be in it. And I just wanted to give them an example of one person handling it differently to think about how to, to participate. And so that's one. Second thing is recognizing what changes you went into for the crisis and thinking about the default is undo all those things. So if you were 24/7 on your WhatsApp groups or whatever, just turn off notifications for a few hours and move away. So that's one thing. Um, and then another thing that I think is really powerful in those moments is recognizing that you have to do something proactive, which is recover. Recovery is its own thing. So, rest, take a walk around the block, sleep, go out for drinks, like whatever it is you need to do to recover, to devote some specific energy to recovery. And then, sorry, go ahead.
I do want to jump in on your
Yeah.
second point, which was you were saying, pay attention to whether you're still checking WhatsApps 24/7. I think another piece that we've talked about is around how you're communicating with your team. For example, if there were things that you were asking people to do, spur of the moment had to get done, it's sometimes hard to slow down that momentum. And then you realize, hey, it's actually not, I need this in 5 seconds urgent anymore.
Right, exactly. I think that's really good. It's just trying to narrate as many things. One way to think about it is the physics of the universe change during a crisis. You can bend
Mhm.
time in ways that you kind of can't if you're in a crisis all the time because it's just not sustainable. It's like a sprint.
Right. Right.
And
And
so recognizing that the physics have changed and trying to see the implications wherever possible, I think is pretty powerful.
absolutely. And I think that recognizing that as the leader, you might have a different definition of what starts and ends the crisis, right? Than what somebody on your team might. And somebody on your team might just be looking to you, right?
Yeah,
Somebody on your team might, their whole decision making around all of this might be just following what you say is
totally. Really
happening.
well put. Really well put. And then I think there's like typical tying up loose ends kind of stuff. One is gratitude. Who are all the people who did something, or organizations that did something that you feel grateful for, and what's an appropriate way to express gratitude to them. Another one is learning. What did we learn from this? What else can we do? How would this affect what we do differently? Trying to find some way to document that if you need to, all of that kind of stuff. And I think that kind of covers it. I mean, I imagine there are some other things, but that's a reasonably good,
Yeah.
I think, head start on stuff.
Yeah. And I think the other piece about looking back is not only thinking about how to handle what caused the crisis. So like, use this example specifically. A lot of teams are thinking about their treasury management. That's one thing to consider.
Great example of where the lessons learned are. HeavyBit had a great post on that.
Yep. And so that is one element of it. And then maybe the team needs to do an element of retrospective on how they handled Thursday and Friday, right? Maybe that needs a game plan for who is the team that needs to come together when there's a crisis. How are we going to communicate? Do we have everybody's emails, phone numbers, and all those pieces to make sure that in emergency situations, things are not disjointed and that you know what to do?
Yeah. And I'll add one last thing, which is there's a gratitude that I struggle with the most, which is the self-gratitude of like, what's the stuff that is worth you taking, even if it's an inner victory lap on. I mean, I didn't notice it till a founder said like sent an all clear message, or maybe it wasn't an all clear message, but something close to it, and a founder update to a bunch of VCs. And one of the VCs responded like, you should maybe consider this insured cash sweep product. I'm like, yeah, this is Sunday. That was totally like Thursday at 2 p.m. advice. And so, not to make fun of my fellow VCs, but I found myself in that appreciating like, wow, is that the standard of service that other people have? Because then we were fast. And because the whole time during the crisis, I was like, gosh, I feel so ignorant and so slow because I wanted to offer more to people, but just recognizing that actually maybe you did okay at some of it.
100%. And, I think that also ties in with the resting, right? Which is like, you can pat yourself on the back and then like loop it in with, what do you do to thank yourself? Like, what is your self-care? And now's a really great time to practice it of all times.
I am working on that muscle as we speak.
Right. I'm like saying this to everybody and to you.
There is one other thing, actually, which is the backlog. Because what happens is normal business accumulates during that period. And so then I'm going back to people and saying like, hey, I'm slow. And by the way, you learn a bunch of stuff. Like every founder who sent me a cold email being like, could you please look at my blah, blah, blah company in the middle of the crisis? I was like, you are not a founder I want to back because you have no sense of what is going on in the world. That probably emailing a VC with a cold pitch during a banking crisis without acknowledging it. And by the way, saying like, hey, I imagine you're in the middle of a crisis right now. Feel free to look at it whenever you want. Fine. But just like, if it looks like any other Tuesday, then it's like, eh. And so there's a bunch of that too. But now I'm going back to my inbox and just thinking. And then, by the way, the other thing though is the shift in perspective is always great. I'm grateful for that too. It's like I look at stuff, I'm like, why was I stressed about that thing? That thing doesn't matter.
Exactly. And hopefully that helps get through the backlog, right? Is realizing that, okay, some things they didn't make the cut then, and maybe they won't make the cut right now. We got to keep it moving.
You are very good at that. Erica on our team is very good at that. No, and I really appreciate that because sometimes what you need to see priorities is an outside perspective. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the outside perspective comes from your own shift in perspective when you go into and out of a crisis. And sometimes it comes from other people. Because like, I'm a different person now than I was a week ago today because I just went through this banking crisis,
Yeah, 100%. And I think recognizing that too is so powerful. I hope everybody recognizes that no matter what position you were in during this, you were probably affected, and you think of the world, of your business, of the economy a little bit differently.
Even if you don't know you were affected, you were probably affected in the sense that, no, we fundamentally believed as people who had worked with this bank, where the majority of the jobs of companies at this bank were outside of Silicon Valley, outside of California, that we're talking about something that had systemic risk for the entire economy. And so, were we right or not? We'll never know. But thank goodness we will never know.
It didn't have to pan out for it to have been a risk, right?
Thank you to the United States government for doing what it needed to do. And also, honestly, my sense is that, they heard voices from people in tech, but this was not about tech. This was about the banking system. So, all right. Well, for those of you who are watching for the first time, the reason this is not advice is because neither of us knows what you should do in your situation. You have to decide for yourself. Any parting thoughts before we go, Lori?
No, I mean, I guess I'm really grateful that in our original conversation and now we pay attention to the tactical and the emotional. I think that that's kind of the overarching message, right? Is that there are tasks you can do, and then there's also care you can give yourself and others.
I was listening to a podcast that my cousin made, who my cousin is a neuroscientist, and she made a podcast about neuroscience. And I listened to the first episode and they had a Buddhist neuroscientist, and she was talking about the intersection of Buddhism and modern neuroscience. And she said one similar idea is your mind makes the world. And so, when you are feeling in it, that is constructing your reality.
Yes,
So the two overlap.
that's the way to end.
There we go. All right. To be continued. Thank you, Lori.